It's me! What's up, my crafty mofos? Today's project is a cuddly, handmade cat bed, or dog bed, though you will need to adjust the size if you have a larger dog. If you've used either of my square bottom bag tutorials, the process for making this bed will be very familiar, it's just bigger and shallower. I'm going to go ahead and toss up the measurements, and then we'll talk a little bit about materials. You will need one piece of main fabric cut into a rectangle that is 24 inches by 30 inches. One piece of lining fabric cut into a rectangle the same size, 24 inches by 30 inches. And an optional piece of Insulated cut into, you guessed it, a rectangle of 24 by 30 inches. I will talk a little bit more about the Insulated in just a minute, but first I want to talk about the size. I originally sized this bed for my cat Grady. He was an average-sized cat, and it fit him pretty much perfectly. But the fellow pictured here, Ghost, is a very large cat. He can squeeze into it, and he does, but chunkier boys would probably benefit from a slightly larger bed. If you have a monster cat, like my cat Ghost, try cutting your pieces at 30 inches by 36 inches. If you have a dog and you want to go larger, like I mentioned before, you can scale the bed up to any size. The key to sizing it is remembering that the gussets will subtract about 14 inches from the width and the length of the bed. So keep that in mind. Now let's talk a little bit about Insulated. It is often used for making pot holders and oven mitts because of its ability to insulate, thus the name Insulated. It looks a lot like batting, but if you look closely, there's actually a shiny silver layer under all of the white fluff. That silver layer is mylar, and it's the same material used in metallic birthday balloons and emergency heat blankets. It basically reflects heat the same way a mirror reflects light. That's why it makes a great oven mitt. The heat is bounced back toward the pan and away from your hand. So again, this is really an optional part of this tutorial, but I specifically wanted a super warm bed because Grady got very grumpy when he was cold.
Roar.
So using a pet bed, the idea here is the Insulated will bounce the body heat from your pet back to their body, making it essentially a self-heating pet bed. If you don't have or don't want to use Insulated, that's fine. You can use an additional layer of fleece or batting to add a little more softness and warmth to the bed. All right, to start, I've got my 3 identical rectangles cut out, one in fleece, one in cotton, one in Insulated. I'm going to attach the Insulated to the fleece layer first. Using my big fat ruler as a guide, I'm going to pin the Insulated to the wrong side of the fleece from one corner to the other. You can draw guidelines if you find that easier, but I'm going to pin and eyeball it because it's a cat bed, and my cats are not going to notice if this stitching is not perfectly straight. Pin and then sew, and you'll end up with a big X like this. Next, we will mark the piece of cotton like so. These are my big honkin' 7-inch gussets. If you followed any of my bag tutorials that have a gusset and a square bottom, that's pretty much what we're doing here. Assemble the cotton and the fleece, right sides together, and cut out the gusset squares. Once the gussets are cut out, we will separate the cotton and the fleece pieces again. Matching the corners and ends, fold the gussets, right sides together, and pin. Sew the gussets closed using a 1/2-inch seam allowance. Repeat for the cotton piece. Fold the gussets, right sides together, and pin. Sew the gussets closed using a 1/2-inch seam allowance, but not so fast. On the cotton piece, leave one of the gussets half sewn. Sew from the top edge down, stopping halfway and backstitching, so that the corner end remains open for turning. With the right sides together, place the cotton layer inside the fleece layer. Match up the gusset seams along the raw edges and pin together. Once you've got the whole top edge pinned, stitch with a 1/2-inch seam allowance. Here is our stitched top edge. Now we will go find the gusset we left open and turn the whole thing right sides out. Okay, now that we have everything flipped around correctly, We shall turn our attention to that one remaining gusset that we only sewed part of the way closed. Turn the raw edges of the open gusset in about 1/2 inch to match the 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then top stitch it shut the rest of the way. I'm sure I sound like a broken record at this point. If you're picky about these things, you can sew this closed by hand so that the stitching won't show. But if my cats think I'm hand stitching this bed, they've got another thing coming. I generally do this next part with my hands, but if you want to press with an iron, you can do that. We want to get that top edge in tip-top shape. So I will mush and shove with my fingers and pin it in place. And then when I've got it how I like it, I will top stitch around the top about 1/2 inch from the edge. Woohoo! You're done! A nice cozy bed is all set for your little fur friend to snuggle in. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss my next tutorial. Leave a comment below and let me know how your project turned out. And be sure to visit whatthecraft.com for more crafty tips, tutorials, and kick-ass sewing patterns.